Many greats have graced the hallowed halls of Weekly Shonen Jump history over the years, with some remaining steadfast and impactful decades after they first began. Every once in a while, though, something new and exciting comes out of the magazine that invigorates a new legion of fans and leaves a bustle of discussion in its wake. In the past several years, we've seen hype drum up around several new franchises, including Assassination Classroom, My Hero Academia, and One Punch Man. However, a seemingly less than traditional series with just as much heart and soul and intrigue put into it has also been making the rounds recently, and particularly because of its 2019 anime adaptation. The Promised Neverland is that series, a manga written by Kaiju Shirai and illustrated by Posca Demizu, beginning its serialization in Weekly Shonen Jump on August 1st, 2016. An anime adaptation produced by Cloverworks premiered from January to March of 2019, and a second season is already in the works for 2020. Set in the year of 2045, The Promised Neverland follows Emma, an 11-year-old orphan living in the Gracefield House, an isolated orphanage which is the home of her and 37 other children. Their daily lives are wonderful and full of peace, they receive gourmet food for all meals, they have nice clean clothes, and they play plenty of games with each other, and all of them receive the enduring and unconditional love of their mother, the caretaker Isabella. On the property they live, the orphans are permitted complete freedom to roam, with the exception of venturing beyond the grounds or the gate which connects the house to the outside world. Predictably, this tinge of intrigue from the isolated setting, and even more so from the numbers branding each child's neck in uniform and militaristic fashion, seeds us with a sense of worry and doubt even in the inconspicuous beginning moments of our time in Gracefield. This trepidation all too soon comes to a sudden and horrifying head, too, as when one of the orphans is allegedly sent away to be adopted, Emma and Norman, having followed to return a stuffed toy to her that she had left behind, find out that she has been killed, that their idyllic home is actually a cattle farm where children are raised as food for demons, and worse still, that their loving mother answers to the demon's beck and call. With their lives on the line and the clock ticking ever closer to another shipment day, Emma and Norman join with Ray to find a way to escape along with their family. And this is where the game begins. The Promised Neverland was launched in issue 34 of Weekly Shonen Jump on August 1st, 2016. It's the second collaborative work of Shirai and Demizu, with their first being Poppy no Negai. On July 25th of 2016, Viz Media announced plans to digitally publish the manga in English, with printed volumes to follow. A comedic spin-off titled Oyakusoku no Neverland was published on the Shonen Jump Plus app from January to March of 2019, with the bound volume following in June. In the 26th issue of Weekly Shonen Jump on May 28th of 2018, an anime television series based on the manga was announced to air on Fuji TV's late-night Noitamina anime programming block. The series was animated by Cloverworks and directed by Mamoru Kanbei, best known for his directing credits on Elfen Lied, Sound of the Sky, and Kimi to Boku. The soundtrack was composed by Takahiro Obata, and the series ran for 12 episodes. The opening theme song, Touch Off, was performed by the band Overworld, with the ending themes Zetai Zetsume and Lamp both being performed by Koshu Nie. The series is available for streaming from Aniplex of America on Crunchyroll, Hulu, Funimation Now, and HIDIVE, and also began airing on Adult Swim's Toonami block on April 13th, 2019. A second season is planned for 2020, with the first having covered chapters 1 to 37 of the manga. As of August 2017, the manga had 1.5 million copies in print, with that number increasing to 2.1 million by October of the same year. As of January 2019, the first 12 volumes had 8.8 million copies in print worldwide. This kind of popularity is no easy feat, although it's certainly far from uncommon in the world of Shonen Jump. What makes The Promised Neverland so endearingly unique in this category, however, is that it strays fairly far from the superpowered battles so unanimous with its magazine's reputation. You won't find any jutsus, devil fruits, or special techniques littering the pages of this manga, and instead you'll find the machinations, plans, and tense pacing of a truly potent and edge-of-your-seat story. In a way, it feels as if a spiritual successor in some respects to the overwhelmingly particular mind games of former Shonen Jump series Death Note, and although its overall tone is far different from that series, it's easy to see where the comparisons come from. Shonen Jump and shonen manga in particular has always been a breeding ground for battle manga, where fights are the name of the game, but physical fights, while being the most frequent go-to of the genre, have also been experimented with heavily by creators wishing to take a more unorthodox swing at the stuff. And this is where The Promised Neverland truly shines. Like Death Note before it, The Promised Neverland features a veritable plenty of battles and obstacles for our heroes to overcome, but the tension lies less so in the physical aptitude and battle strategy of our plucky protagonists, but rather in their ability to gather information, use that information to their advantage, and avoid detection by their much more clever and adept adult chaperones. This leads to a really heavy, intense atmosphere permeating every page of the series proper, as you never know when the other shoe will drop and consequently change everything, either for the better or the worse. What really heightens the tension even more so for this series than something like Death Note, however, lies in the strength of its basic premise. A teenager with a god complex evading police is certainly an engaging concept, but there's something inherently more visceral and immediately emotionally gripping about a group of cattle children trying in vain to escape a fate of being sent away as an entree for some snooty eldritch skeleton monsters. This, combined with the likability of the robust cast of orphan children, really makes you invested in the struggle of these characters, and hope desperately that their plans succeed, even when things look progressively more grim by the second. Speaking of character likability, I'd be remiss not to talk about some of them, because they really are a driving force of what makes this story so enjoyable. For example, the series has an astoundingly effective first villain in the form of Mama Isabella. Her gentle plastic smiles only ever get creepier by the second after the cat is out of the bag concerning her true nature, and every frame she lingers in, even the background of, feels all the more unsafe for her presence in them. This lends extremely well to the ambient sense of unease that nigh infiltrates every nook and cranny of the orphanage's environment, as no one place ever quite feels safe enough to plan a prison break, but there's nowhere else to go. This, combined with her almost cold sense of calculation and nearly uncanny ability to learn things you don't think she has any way to know, makes her a bewilderingly chilling presence to contend with, and a massive obstacle of an antagonist for us as viewers to watch our heroes try to overcome. On the flip side of things, you also have Sister Crone, Isabella's backup she calls in around episode 2. Crone is much less subtle, and consequently seems to be working for her own benefit as much as she works for the systems. She's a lot more overt and willing to lay it on thick than Isabella is, which in a way does make her seem much less blatantly threatening, but certainly doesn't cease to make her immediate threat to the children any less serious. After all, any adult, expert tactician or not, has several leagues of advantage over a group of children mostly 11 and under any day of the week. Of course, without a strong protagonist to carry our group, things might start to seem much too exceedingly bleak for its own good, and that's where Emma comes into the picture. Emma is, no exaggeration, probably one of, if not my #1 favorite shonen protagonist of all time, hands down, and there's a very good reason for that. Emma carries a lot of the trademark traits that make up the basic composition of a shonen hero. She's exuberant, positive, full of energy and care for her friends, and is steadfastly determined and resolute in all situations. She's unrelentingly positive to a fault, and although she can sometimes be uncouth or brash, she's incredibly honest and able to convey her feelings extremely well to other people. There are several incredibly important traits that set Emma apart from the rest of the crowd, however. First of all, there's the fact that, well, she's a girl. Not to say that there haven't been plenty of incredibly capable female characters in shonen series, but having one that is basically the front and center main character is somewhat uncommon, especially in the land of Weekly Shonen Jump. Shonen manga, as its name would suggest, is mainly a manga type that aims its swing primarily at young boys, meaning similarly that young boys are often the protagonists of these series as they're thought to be more relatable. Emma breaks this mold in being a female character who is not only a main character of a shonen series, but also carries a lot of character traits otherwise denoted to male characters rather than female ones. Oftentimes, especially in group ensembles, you see female characters in shonen get the position of the smart one, somebody who has a great amount of intelligence but lacks in the physical department. In fact, this isn't even really regulated to just shonen manga, it's a pretty pervasive trope in general. Emma goes against the grain here though, as although she's plenty intelligent in her own right, pure intelligence is not her greatest strength. Emma is outright stated to be the most athletic of her peers, meaning that somewhat non-traditionally, she is the most physically adept of her group, even more so than the two male characters who fill out the main trio. And while Emma is billed as much more emotionally driven than Norman and Ray are, this is never pushed as a bad thing. When Norman and Ray insist her plans to bring everyone along are unrealistic or naive, Emma is stubbornly resolute in the idea that nobody gets left behind, and instead of simply refusing to see reason or resigning cynically to the continued death of her family, she trusts them enough to come up with a plan that will benefit them all and then take every risk necessary to carry it out. This character trait is the heart and center of Emma's overall character, and carries with her as a philosophical through line throughout the rest of the entire manga thus far. While many readers still brazenly miss the point and insist Emma is too idealistic, her idealism is always predicated on a firm belief that she can accomplish what she's setting out to do, and live a life of no regrets in the process. This knight always manages to yield her the results she desires as she paves the road to victory by her own means, and it's an exceedingly uplifting message to receive from a series that so thoroughly works to stack the deck against its protagonists. Emma is the collectivist soul living at the very center of the Promised Neverland, the belief that working with your fellow man and treating them not as burdens that could potentially weigh you down, but as allies who will try to help and fight with you, is the optimal path to victory. Consequently, many of the series' villains reflect the completely opposite stance on this issue, with Isabella serving as the first and nearly most direct voice to the contrary, embodying everything Emma could be if she gives up on escaping and accepts her fate as inevitable and not worth fighting over. Isabella is someone who has already given up on changing anything, deciding that her life has already been decided for her, rather than something that she can change of her own free will. And it's this stark contrast between the two that frames the war they wage on one another as more personally driven than a simple game of cat and mouse. Furthermore, it's this firm desire for Emma's ideals to be upheld and the day to be saved that keeps us invested in every consequent trial the orphans face, as we grit our teeth and hope for the plan to follow through. Plans, of course, are a large part of what makes the series so compelling to begin with, as they're the bulk of what you'll be watching unfold in the story proper. And it's a good thing Shirai knows how to write well-thought-out plans, moving parts, and shocking twists, because this story wouldn't work nearly as well otherwise. Strategy is a large part of what makes The Promised Neverland so engaging, and the weight of the characters' own personal ideologies that feed into how they put their plans together makes it all the more weighty and close to home as a result when one wins out over the other. Speaking of satisfying elements, it's hard not to emphasize just how much this story excels at literary connections, art, and especially a strong plot. Foreshadowing is around every corner, and the further you go, the more you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together, with each new clue being nearly as earth-shattering as the last. I wouldn't say it's necessarily Higurashi levels of mystery crafting, but it's certainly nothing to sneeze at. The anime in particular features a lot of incredible and effective camera work and shots that really work both the emotion and tension of certain scenes to incredible new heights. This is in no small part helped by the absolutely breathtaking soundtrack, which makes incredible use of leitmotif to deliver some of the punchiest and most heart-wrenching moments I've seen on television in a long, long time. The voice acting is also suitably excellent, with Sumire Morohoshi's bouncy yet determined portrayal of Emma being a perfect fit for the character. Maria Issei's low and brooding tones being nigh inseparable from Rei's snark, and Yuko Kaida's warmth and gentle lulls being just as charming as they can be terrifying for Isabella. And that's just to name a few. Of course, this beautiful artistry doesn't just extend to the anime, as the manga is rife with incredibly beautiful artwork, the least of which certainly not being the many beautiful and intricately detailed vistas and full-color pages that Demizu is able to churn out regularly. The manga itself also has a very natural flow to its artwork that makes it fairly easy to read, even when it gets monologue-heavy, and panel space is always utilized rather well to effectively reduce on clutter and emphasize what the page wants us to focus on. The way dynamic paneling and page turns in particular are utilized also contribute vastly to the story's sudden shift of tones and make dramatic reveals or moments all the more deadly as a result. As far as stylistic influences go as well, I'd like to compliment something about The Promised Neverland that I find to be especially rare in the world of manga: its aesthetic. What I mean by that is the air of artistic influence the series carries is just as much seemingly inspired by other shonen as it is by fairy tales and in particular English iconography. In fact, The Promised Neverland features a variety of Western media references which, while not entirely unheard of for a Japanese property, does seem particularly odd when compared to other mangaka. Specifically, writer Shirai-san has recently commented on having watched the Netflix original series Umbrella Academy, which suggests his English must be fairly good. Recent chapters seem to borrow heavily from aesthetic influences belonging to Alice in Wonderland, which is fairly popular in Japan, but other clear influences to the series include Peter Pan, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Dante's Divine Comedy, which are all fairly underutilized in the world of Japanese fiction, especially in a country so insular as Japan often is. As relatively unimportant as these aesthetic choices may seem on first glance, you'll find that this array of Western influence serves to make the world of the series feel distinctly alien compared to that of many anime contemporaries. A lot, and I mean a lot, of anime and manga take place almost exclusively in Japan, and it's easy to see why. Most people who live in Japan are, well, Japanese, and a majority of citizens are very likely to stay within the country's borders for their entire life, so their fiction is reflective of their experiences. Meanwhile, The Promised Neverland features even the slightest details that people might overlook, such as using pinwheels to refer to Pentecost, Gracefield House looking pretty distinctly like some buildings in England, and a lot of those visually similar areas of England being home to quite a bit of cattle farming. There are, of course, also several characters in the series named directly after characters from Peter Pan, and suffice it to say, this sets The Promised Neverland apart from the pack in a very significant way, which not only serves to give it a unique identity, but also adds immensely to the overall vibe of the series, wherein the children seem so desperately out of their element against the forces that pursue them that you'll wonder what they'll even do next. The Promised Neverland is a tour de force of emotional storytelling, unique and lovable characters, and exceedingly interesting story wrapped into a format that takes and excels at the most interesting and engaging aspects of battle manga and manages to work them flawlessly into a more grounded and suspenseful framework. It's a series that's focused fiercely on the hopeful and brash and courageous and the heroic and the risky but rewarding. It knows the horrors of this sad, miserable world, and it shouts in defiance while planning its next big move. And rather than relying on the power fantasies of extreme transformations and supernatural abilities, it shows us that we too could succeed with a head as strong as steel and a heart as bright as gold. Couple that with incredible music, breathtaking artwork, and a plethora of pop cultural influences, the likes of which we rarely see in Japanese fiction, and you've got yourself a formula for one incredible and unique series. And that, among many other reasons, is why you should watch or read The Promised Neverland.
Fire.